here is the first 3 blocks. They're all the same embroidery design, the star. So I made blocks 1, 2, and 3. All right, they all went in their own like hoop, but like I said, I don't like cut my stabilizer. I just slide the hoop down so that I could do all 3, and that helps me save my stabilizer. So that was page 12. All right, so now I'm getting ready to start the next applique on page 13. So 13 is the mug. All right, so we need our background fabric. So the background fabric is this fat 1/8. All right, and it tells me to cut an 8.5 by 8.5. Again, I'm going to cut it 7.5 by 7.5, and I'm going to put my woven interfacing or my woven fusible on the back. I'm using the OESD one. It looks like it's worked out really nice here in the other ones. Okay, the other piece I need is the scrap for the mug. So when I lay the gray on this red, I can see some of those dark lines coming through. I am going to put woven interfacing on here only because of the shadow through. All right, I don't want that. I want the mug to kind of really pop on this fabric and not have those lines going through it. So I'm going to put the woven fusible on the gray dot as well. Okay, that is the applique that goes on the mug. Now, the other thing you need to dig out, and I had to open up my embellishment kit, and right in the top is this little pouch. It was sitting in here, and it has all these fasteners in it. What you need is you need the 4 little dots, which is the loop part of the dots. It's really rough. Okay, the smooth ones we won't be needing. I left them in the bag. So I need 3 of these for this project. I'm not going to cut the one apart. I'm going to leave all 3 together. When we use the 3 we need, I'll put the one back in this bag. All right, so that I can keep it together with all the other loops. So you need 3 of those, and those are going to be sewn on in your embroidery file. Okay, they're in these steps down here. So what else do I need? Okay, I need to get my 6 by 6 piece of batting, right? And let's see what the mug is. So I go back to my picture. I always refer back to this picture. I think it's really easy to go back and do that. And we are working on what is number 6. So I go down here and I look at the mug. So I want the 6 by 6 design again, the same as the stars. So we're going to be finishing the square as a 6.5 by 6.5 square when we cut it. So when it's sewn in, it'll be 6 by 6. So I want to open up the KDQ 100 cup 1. All right. And that's called cup, like quilting wise. So I believe it's going to have a bunch of cups on it, like floating around in the air. So that is our quilting file. All right, so we need to get that quilting file loaded up. Then we need to go load up our applique for the mug, and the mug has number 2 on it. Okay, so I'm putting it in the quilt. It's going to be day number 2 of the Advent calendar. There is nothing that says later on you can't stitch this out again. You could skip the marshmallow piece, right, and put your own little buttons up there or whatnot to represent marshmallows, and use this square on something else. But I'm going to put it with the number 2. All right, so if I look here, I'm going to need my gray and my dark brown. I have a black and I have the dark red. Threads is what I'm going to be using, and I'm calling them that way. These are the colors on page 3. The red is the square. Where did the red square? The red square was number 6. I have what they call a gray square, And I have the brown square and the black square. You can hardly tell those colors. You really have to look at them. You have to have good eyes. I really wish they would put something in these squares to identify the color, whether they use a number, you know, or some letters or something. I really wish they would do that. It's really hard. You know, somebody really would have to help someone if they're colorblind, because the colors, you know, when you're looking at these little tiny squares, are really hard. So what do I have? I have the dark red over there that I used on the star. So let me dig out. Here's my gray and my dark brown that I will be using. Of course, black is black, white is white. All right, and then the red. So the red color that I am using is Floriani 190. Okay, so the red I'm using is 190. The gray that I am using is 483. Again, Floriani. And the dark brown I'm using is 379. So those are going to be my 3 colors that I need, and I'm going to leave my white bobbin in. So I'm going to go cut my fabrics, add my fusible woven to the back, load up my design, and we'll start stitching it out. And if there's anything crazy about stitching it out, I will film that. But right now, this is where I am. I am starting now, page 13, the second the second applique. We did this. These were 3. So this is really like a block 4 in this quilt. Okay, not that you need a reminder, but again, you know, I got my stabilizer. It stitches the, I loaded up my design with the quilting. Remember, the quilting one for this one is, was number 6, cup 1, and it's KDQ 100. Okay, and I'm loading the 6x6 in. So I'm doing my quilting, my block by block first, which is going to do my quilting. So it gave me my placement line for my batting. I'm going to lay my batting down. I'm going to do the second part, which is going to tack down my batting, and then you're going to trim, right? You're going to trim anything outside the tack down line. And again, that's to keep the batting out of the seams. All right, so our seams will lay, you know, nice and flat. And then the next stitch is where to place my fabric. Right, these are all the same steps for all of these applique pieces. And it does go around it twice. I did put fusible woven on the back of my backing of the mug, and on the applique piece, which is the mug itself. All right, so I put it on both this time because I want, I didn't want to see, it kind of helps block some of that red coming through the gray. All right, stitch number 3 of the embroidery file tells me where to place my fabric. And again, it's that big basting stitch. Same things over and over. So, you know, when you start doing these, you kind of get used to everything that you have to do. All right, and all the steps. All right, the next step is to put my piece of fabric down. And again, I like to put it at the top and then slide it down. And say, okay, I have the same amount on the right and left, and then try to take a guess at top and bottom. And then I actually fold it over a little bit, and I look at how much is at the top and how much is at the bottom. Okay, I flipped my mug. So my mug is not going to stitch out sideways like it shows in the picture. Mine is going to stitch up and down, and because of that, I'm making sure that my diagonal line here is going that way. All right. because that's what I believe is the way that it shows it in the picture. So my next step is to actually tack this down. I'm tacking my fabric down now. Now you can understand the stitch before this stitch that shows you where to place your fabric. If you have a good eye, you could have skipped that whole stitch and put your fabric down and then ran this stitch. All right? I mean, there's nothing that, you know, says that you had to do that. Okay, the next one is the quilting. All right, so this is number 5 of that file. Now, the quilting again, it's all block by block, so it's going to quilt inside the 6-inch block because that's what the finish of this size is 6 inches. All right. Now, when it's done doing my quilting, then I really start working on the embroidery design. So I would be working from page 13 on the right-hand side, and you'll have step 1 and 2. It doesn't designate a color, and that's where you're going to stitch the placement line for the mug. You're going to place your fabric right side up, and then you're going to tack down your fabric. So same thing as the star, order-wise. All right? You can see it's doing, you know, some big, I want to say, what do we call that stitch? Meander, with some cups here and there in the meander. All right? So it's just going to fill up the, you know, not quite to the edge of the 6x6 quilting. And then when that's done, I'm going to do the placement line and the tack down of the mug. Now when I look at the mug, I think that it's all satin stitched around. I wanted to see if I could see the finished picture kind of close up. And it does have a satin stitch around the entire mug, so it doesn't matter what color you stitch it down with. So I could leave my white in that I currently have and stitch my placement line and my tack down on the mug. I still have my white bobbin in. Again, if you've been sewing a lot on your needle, you might want to put a new needle in. So far, I'm good with mine. I'm now going to hit start again. I'm going to do the placement line of the mug in white. And my piece of fabric should be big enough because I'm using that 5x5 piece that I did put fusible woven on the back side. Okay, so there is my mug. And I am going to try to line up like 2 sides with my fusible woven and have the extra off the, you know, go off the other 2 sides. All right. So now I'm tacking down my mug. And when it's done tacking this down, I will trim around it. Now, if you were afraid that that fabric would move, then I would tape the fabric in place. My machine doesn't jump around a whole lot, so I usually am pretty good not using tape for just the basic applique. All right, I got my scissors that I like, which are the double curves. All right. I like to use the double curves usually with the applique pieces. So I again moved my hoop to where it would be easier for me to reach without taking the hoop off my machine to trim around. I apologize if my arm gets in the way. Again, all I'm doing is I'm trimming the gray polka dotted fabric around the mug close to the stitch line, but I don't want to cut the stitch line. Okay. There we go. So there is the shape of the mug. The next stitch will be gray, and it's going to do the mug satin detail. So I loaded my gray in, and I'm hitting start so it can do all of this satin stitching. I'm going to pause it right there. I'm going to trim this one thread that was up there on the top so I don't have to worry about trying to find it later. All right, so we're going to do this satin outline. It's going to do a really big wide satin stitch here at the top of this mug. I'm almost wondering if we shouldn't have put some top coat behind it to block out some of those reds. So hopefully it covers really nice. If it doesn't, that's what I'm going to suggest that you do. OESD has, it's like plastic, but it helps you, it'll go underneath the embroidery stitching. So once it would stitch this little piece of it, you could rip the rest of it off. And the gray would, you know, there it does come in gray. The gray would stay underneath and it would block out those colors. But if this has a nice satin type fill, we're not going to see that. So I'm going to pause while it does this. I think it's going to take a few minutes to do all this satin stitching. When this is done, I'm going to put in the dark brown and we're going to do the cocoa fill. Okay, so it's done with my gray satin. So it went all the way around the mug. It did this top rim part and it did the handle. And now I put the dark brown in, the cocoa color, and it's going to do the color of the cocoa here. So it's going to stitch all of that in. So I'm going to hit start. All right, so that cocoa color is number 4 of this embroidery file. But if you did the quilting with it, I'm on number 9. Okay, so you know. So I'm going to let this stitch out and we will be back. Alright, so the next stitch is black. Alright, and it's going to do some of the rim at the top of my mug. You can see the brown there. It's got like a texture to it, the way that it filled in the cocoa in the mug. Alright, so we're going to work on that brown going around the top. And it does it on the back and the front. So I'm going to let that stitch out and we'll return when that is done. Okay, so as you can see, it has stitched the black all the way around and I put my red in and now I'm going to stitch the number 2 on the mug. So I am on step number 6 on the page 13. All right, doing the number 2, but because I did the quilting with this file, my embroidery machine says I'm on step number 11. All right, I just wanted to trim that thread because it didn't get pulled down and under, that it doesn't get stuck. So after the number 2, we're on to number 7. All right, so number 7 is, they're suggesting a white color thread, and we're going to stitch the hook loop placement line. All right, so if you look at picture 7, it's going to do these 3 little circles down here. Okay, and that's where we're going to place the little dots. All right, which is the rough side of the dots. It's going to be facing up, and they tell you can just do a little dab of glue on them. Probably better to glue it than to use tape on those. All right, so I have some temporary glue that I'm going to use. I found that this is one that I like when I'm trying to close seams sometimes. It helps hold it. It's called glue basting it. It's temporary basting glue. All right, I got this at So What, but I like it, and it has a really small point on the end where the glue comes out. All right, so it tells me to put white in. All right, so remember, always cut your thread at the top and pull it through at the bottom so that you don't get any lint in your tension discs. I'm loading white back in, you know, and the white is because all the dots are white, so this will kind of blend in with the little dots before your marshmallows get put on there, which are your little felt balls that are also in your embellishment kit. So I'm going to hit start. So it's going to stitch those 3 little circles for us, so we know where to put our dots. And I already dug the dots out. Remember, I have 4 little dots, but I'm only using 3 of them right now. Okay, got to do another one. You see I have a little thread here on the first one. I'm going to trim that out of the way. All right, so I'm going to pull my hoop out just a little bit. It's going to come towards me, and that I do with my machine. I'm not physically taking it out of the connection. My machine has some buttons for me to be able to move my hoop forward. All right, so I'm going to put a little glue here. Now this glue does not stay. As far as I know, it does wash out. So it's not a permanent glue, okay? It's just to help us. All right, so I'm going to take my dot. Remember, you're doing the rough ones. And I want to place my dots over that placement line. And tack them, and you know, use that glue to hold them in place. Okay. So I think they're good shape. Now remember, you have the 1 dot left. I'm going to put it back in the plastic, and I'm going to put it back in the embellishment kit so it doesn't get lost between now and when I need this extra dot to go on something else. All right, so I'm going to hit start, and I'm doing the last part of the embroidery file, which is number 8, which is going to actually stitch down those Velcro little dots. All right, so when this is done stitching the dots, basically you're done with this particular embroidery file, right? We would end up taking it out of the hoop, and we would actually do the trimming instructions, okay? And this would finish also at 6.5 by 6.5 like the other stars. And I just don't cut them all now. I just wait. And then I, you know, lay my everything out on the table, and I go back through and I cut them later so that I can like stack all the ones that are the same size together. And I always double check before I cut the size that I'm cutting it correctly. All right. It's just me. I like to stack them all and everything, because remember, I might not be working on this for a few days. I'm going to be putting it all back in the box and get it out if I work on it again. So that was the last part of that embroidery file. So I don't know if we can see this, but that is the mug, and it has little meander, and it has little cups like on some of the quilting that you can see. All right, so that finishes the applique design that was on page 13, or the mug.